Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about the Space Marines as we get into the Soul Drinkers chapter. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day, and if you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. It's because of them that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Soul Drinkers. The Soul Drinkers were a renegade chapter of Space Marines declared excommunicate traitorous by the Inquisition because of their extremely high levels of mutation and obvious corruption by chaos. Yet the Soul Drinkers still consider themselves to be loyal to the Emperor of Mankind, if not his Imperium. The Soul Drinkers' power armor is purple with ornate bone and gold trim, and a golden Imperial Aquila or Imperialis on their breastplate. The Soul Drinkers chapter badge is a golden chalice with 5 spirals of soul energy rising out of the top, and the 2 blades of a golden laurel wreath sprouting from its base. This is centered on a field of purple. When the Arch-Traitor Warmaster Horus was slain and the rebellion broken, the remaining loyalist legions were broken up into chapters, so no man would have the power over so many Space Marines ever again. Rogodorn knew the pride his sons took in the glory of the Imperial Fists, and fought to have his legion left intact, but he bowed to his fellow Primarchs, and his Marines became a multitude of chapters, one retaining the name of the Imperial Fists, and the others taking on new names and heraldry, ready to forge new paths into Imperial history. A new tier of Adeptus Astartes was created. This event became known as the Second Founding. As such, the first warriors to form the ranks of the new chapters were the very same Space Marines who had fought at the side of their Primarch before and during the Horus Heresy. To each of his successor chapters was given a symbol of their sacred purpose, gifted by Dorn himself, so that they would remember that his spirit was with them always, and his glory was there also. The Soul Drinkers formed from the fleet-based shock attack elements of his legion, receiving the Soul Spear, a relic warp vortex weapon. Dorn himself had found it on the dark and lonely world during the Great Crusade. With it he had speared great warp beasts, and from it he hung his banner on 100 worlds reconquered in the name of the Emperor. One of the Soul Drinkers' most famous campaigns occurred during the War of Apostasy, also known as the Terran Crusade, which was a series of battles and military campaigns fought against the forces of the renegade High Lord of Terra, Gouge Vandire, during the Age of Apostasy's Reign of Blood. In the year 378 of the 36th millennium, the Black Templars High Marshal declared a crusade against Vandire. The Black Templars, together with their parent chapter the Imperial Fists, the Soul Drinkers, the Zealot Firehawks, and elements of the Martian Tech Guard, took the fight to Terra itself and laid siege to Vandire's ecclesiarchal palace. The crusade ended with the death of Vandire at the hands of one of his former bodyguards, Alicia Dominica, the founder and future patron imperial saint of the Adeptus Sororitas. The Soul Drinkers also had many notable victories on other worlds against Xeno races, such as the Eldar, during this time. The Soul Drinkers were declared excommunicate traitorous by the Inquisition after their obsessive need to retrieve the relic known as the Soul Spear, which had been lost for 1,000 years, since the Soul Drinkers' flagship, Sanctifier, had been lost on a warp jump. It had finally been found, residing in the collection of a degenerate who had no comprehension of its true significance. The Soul Drinkers vowed to bring it back to their chapter's embrace. This eventually brought them into conflict with the Adeptus Mechanicus. The forces of the Mechanicus were ostensibly assisting the Adeptus Ministorum, but in actuality wanted to obtain the Soul Spear for themselves, so that they might examine and possibly reverse engineer its ancient technology. The standoff between the Soul Drinkers and the other Imperial forces ended with the destruction of the Mechanicus Starfort Laconia, and major damage to several starships of the Adeptus Ministorum and the Adeptus Mechanicus. The remaining Soul Drinkers retreated into their strike cruisers, to an asteroid field, where they were bested by the combined fleets of the Inquisition and the Adeptus Ministorum, until the Soul Drinkers' fleet, led by Chapter Master Gorgoleon, arrived by warp route 931C that had been closed for 600 standard years prior to this incident. After the Soul Drinkers Chapter fleet linked up with the survivors of the Soul Drinkers' assault on the Starfort, Chapter Master told his fellow Soul Drinker captain, Sarpedon, of an offer the Inquisition had made, which required the death of the Space Marines involved in the Laconia incident in exchange for a pardon. Gorgoleon explained that he had refused his offer on the basis that the only person fit to judge a Soul Drinker was another Soul Drinker. This judgment would require Sarpedon to face Gorgoleon himself, in a ritual duel to the death known as the Shield Rites, to determine the righteousness of Sarpedon's actions on Laconia. During the height of the duel, Sarpedon seemed to be affected by some outside power and spontaneously grew 8 arachnoid legs, giving him a crucial advantage over the Chapter Master and enabling him to tear his commander to pieces, and so claim the mantle of Chapter Master for himself. Although he did not know at this time, his mutation was caused by the corrupting powers and influence of the Chaos God Tzeentch, who intended to make the Soul Drinkers yet another one of his countless spawns in the Chaos Eternal War against the Imperium. After a brief but bloody struggle with those who could not accept his mutation, and those who still believed that Sarpedon was uncorrupted, Sarpedon became the new leaders of the Soul Drinkers Chapter. From that point on, he was in command. Despite their rejection by the Imperium of Man itself as an utterly corrupt institution, the Soul Drinkers remained loyal to the Emperor of Mankind, even after they had been exposed to the raw powers of chaos. This exposure subsequently began to manifest mutations in the Chapter's other Space Marines. After a time, the Chapter Apothecary Palace managed to stop the spread of the new mutations, and also to halt the progression of mutations in those Astartes already afflicted, thanks to the retrieval of information held on the planetoid Straxis Luminae. This information came at the price of the Soul Drinkers being forced to abandon one of their sergeants, Telos, and his cadre of assault marines, on their way back from the planetoid, though Telos and his squad turned to the service of Chaos completely to save themselves. The Soul Drinkers next came into conflict with the Crimson Fist Force Commander Rhaenys, and with the Slaaneshi-worshipping Dark Eldar, in an attempt to bring the now Chaos-aligned Sergeant Telos to justice. After a long battle between Chaos forces and the forces of the Imperium, Sarpedon fought Telos in a duel. Sarpedon emerged victorious, and believing Telos dead, he withdrew the Soul Drinkers from combat. Telos survived, only to be killed when the Inquisition bombed the world where Telos and his warband had taken up residence. The Soul Drinkers next had to face the enemies from within and without, as a promising scout marine, brother Eumenes, usurped the chapter's leadership from Sarpedon. Meanwhile, the Howling Griffins chapter had vowed to destroy the ambiguous chaotic forces known as the Black Chalice, which they believed to be the Soul Drinkers chapter. In the end, Sarpedon killed Eumenes, declaring him unworthy of being chapter master. He then addressed the remaining Soul Drinkers battle brothers, asking if any of them wished to take up the burden of the office of chapter master. When none of them responded, Sarpedon declared he would remain the chapter master. Not satisfied with this, at least one squad of the newer Soul Drinker recruits left the chapter. While fleeing from the Adeptus Mechanicus task force, the Soul Drinker Space Hawk was severely damaged and found itself low on fuel. Forced to run from the Mechanicus forces, the Soul Drinkers went deep into the Veil region of the galaxy in search of fuel. They discovered the Necrons, active on many worlds in the region of space, all with signs of previous human settlements, but now infested with the undying ancient Xenos. Eventually, they came upon the last of the human worlds that the Necrons were still in the process of cleansing of all life. The Soul Drinkers made a deal with the survivors. They allowed the humans time to retreat to their spacecraft, while the Soul Drinkers held the Necron forces off, in exchange for the Soul Drinkers receiving fuel. The Soul Drinkers held out against the Necrons, and the escaping human population reached their spaceport as agreed, but a Necron fleet arrived in system, preventing them from leaving. The Adeptus Mechanicus fleet arrived shortly after, and the two fleets began fighting each other. It became obvious that the Imperial forces would soon be destroyed by the more potent Necron fleet, so they began a complex pattern of maneuvers intended to delay the inevitable. When the Soul Drinkers realized they could not beat the approaching Necron forces on the ground while the Mechanicus fleet would lose in space, Sarpedon offered an alliance to the Mechanicus. Chaplain Ictinos of the Soul Drinkers and his flock of Space Marines remained behind to help defend the spaceports and the surviving humans. It is revealed that Ictinos, and through him, his flock, is loyal to another master and not the Emperor of Mankind, although the identity of this master was never clear. Accepting the proposed alliance from the renegade Space Marines, the Mechanicus and the Soul Drinkers set off to the main Necron hub world, Celica, planning to destroy the Necron Lord and leave the rest of the enemy forces in the region leaderless. Arriving at the Necron Tomb World, the Mechanicus crashed their starship into Sakella and deployed their force alongside the Soul Drinkers. A long, bloody battle ensued, as the unlikely allies sought to kill the Necron Lord before the Necron's superior numbers overwhelmed them. Finally, the Imperials arrived at the Necron Lord's headquarters, and Sarpedon dueled and defeated the undying creature. However, in typical Necron fashion, the Necron Lord soon resurrected itself and began crushing Sarpedon to death. Only through the sacrifice of the tech priest Lygus was the Necron Lord finally defeated. Gathering his forces, Sarpedon led his remaining warriors toward the crashed Adeptus Mechanicus starship, where his promised transports were to be awaiting them. Instead, they discovered 3 Imperial Fist Thunderhawk gunships deployed upon the surface of the planet, while 20 Imperial Fists of the Elite First Company in Terminator armor teleported onto the planet, led by First Captain Lysander. He ordered the Soul Drinkers to surrender to Imperial justice or be destroyed. Sarpedon replied by invoking the right to challenge Lysander to a personal duel. Despite Sarpedon's warp-enhanced strength, he had been badly depleted in the earlier fights, and was swiftly defeated by Lysander in a single combat. Sarpedon had ordered the Soul Drinkers to surrender if he was beaten by Lysander, and thus prevented the chapter from being wiped out by the Imperial Fists. The captured Soul Drinkers were brought aboard the ancient and massive starship Phalanx, the mobile fortress monastery of the Imperial Fists. The Imperial Fists intended to prosecute their brother chapter for their apostasy. Though most heretics would never have been granted such an honor, the former Scions of Dorn, the Soul Drinkers, would have their day in court, for the Imperial Fists were a chapter of honor. To them, a trial was more than a mere formality. It was their intention to see every correct procedure and tradition adhered to, so that no man would dare say that they did not give the Soul Drinkers every chance to redeem themselves. The Fists had collected evidence of the Soul Drinkers' deeds, including many that had pitted them against the forces of the Imperium, from which the Soul Drinkers had rebelled. When the Soul Drinkers were first brought on board, they recovered a copy of the Soul Drinkers' so-called Catechism Martial. They acquired this tome from one of the members of Chaplain Ictinos' flock upon the confiscation of his power armor, forcing him to give up the book along with the secrets it contained. These members of Ictinos' flock were the Soul Drinkers whose officers had died in the gradual erosion of the chapter's strength, and who had turned to Chaplain Ictinos for leadership. The treacheries and revelations revealed within the pages of the Catechism Martial made the Imperial Fists take an interest in interrogating Ictinos' Astartes themselves. During the interrogation of Brother Kion by the Imperial Fists, the Soul Drinker revealed the chapter's secret. It was discovered that Dyathos, the legendary philosopher-soldier and author of the Catechism Martial, still lived, despite evidence that he had died over 6 millennia before. Danathos had been interned within the adamantium sarcophagus of a mighty dreadnought, and hidden within a secret tomb on the world of Celica. This tomb was built with a series of ingenious traps put into place, ensuring that none except the Astarte would have the skills to discover the secrets contained within. When Danathos' crypt was discovered by a lone Imperial Fist scout marine, the resurrected Soul Drinker came willing and let himself be brought on board the Phalanx to face his fate alongside his fellow battle brothers. A conclave of Space Marines was formed to listen to the presented evidence and to pass judgment on the renegade chapter. This conclave was composed from various Imperial Fist successor chapters, composing of the Crimson Fists, Howling Griffins, and the Iron Knights. The Conclave was filled with other chapters with no connection to the Imperial Fists, such as the Doom Eagles, Silver Skulls, and the Angels Sanguinae. There was also a representative from the Inquisition, as well as small contingents of Battle Sisters of the Adeptus Sororitas and Tech Priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Brother Rhaenys, the former captain of the Crimson Fist 2nd Company, who had been dishonored by the Soul Drinkers, was appointed the Soul Drinkers' prosecutor. Rhaenys had given up his rank and petitioned his chapter master to walk the path of the warrior's pilgrimage, one who wandered the galaxy seeking redemption outside his chapter by looking for enemies worthy of killing him, so that he could seek redemption in death for failing. When Rhaenys heard that the Soul Drinkers had been captured and were to be tried at the Phalanx, he made haste for the Imperial Fist vessel and presented himself before the chapter master Vladimir Pugh and petitioned for the right to prosecute the Soul Drinkers so as to regain his honor. The loyal servants of the Imperium had gathered to listen to the evidence presented against the Soul Drinkers, while the Imperial Fist chapter master Vladimir Pugh presided as the Justice Lord of the court. During the trial, evidence was presented by both sides, both defending the Soul Drinkers' actions as well as damning them. Multiple revelations were revealed during the course of the trial, including the fact that Dynethos still lived within the body of the Dreadnought that had been hidden within a tomb on Celica's surface. Sarpedon had not been aware of this tomb's existence or that there were any surviving Dreadnoughts from his chapter, as the last one had been believed to have been destroyed 6 millennia earlier. Serving as prosecutor, Rhaenys condemned the Soul Drinkers, implicitly implying that they had been corrupted for millennia while under the guidance of Dynethos. He charged that they had long been sworn to the service of the ruinous powers, and had intended to carry out some plot at the Dark God's behest, intended to damage the Imperium. During Rhaenys' presentation of the evidence against the chapter, Sarpedon finally realized Chaplain Icticos had been manipulating the Soul Drinkers chapter along the path of damnation in order to fulfill some unknown destiny foreseen by the last Dreadnought. Next, Commander Gethsmar of the Angels Sanguinae called into question the validity of the Soul Drinkers' claim of being the genetic sons of the Primarch Rogel Dorn. The Angels Sanguinae had captured a Soul Drinker Spacemarine and extracted his gene seed for medical study to determine whether or not his heresy was the result of corrupted genetics, and they were startled to learn that the Soul Drinkers' genetic legacy could not be traced back to the Imperial Fists. During the course of the trial, pilgrims of the Order of the Blinded Eye conspired to help the Soul Drinkers escape their bondage. They had been manipulated by Dynethos to help him achieve his mysterious objective. Not questioning their newfound freedom, the surviving Soul Drinkers made their last stand within the Phalanx Librarium. The forces of the Imperial Fist and their successor chapter brethren converged on the Soul Drinkers' position, and a vicious firefight ensued. The breakout of the Soul Drinkers from their holding cells was merely a distraction, as Dynethos used this diversion to carry out the final phase of his plan. His most loyal follower, Chaplain Icticos, kidnapped Captain Nicolo of the Iron Knights and brought him to his master. Using the blood of the battered Astarte, the genetic code of Rogel Dorn was the key to unlock an infamous warp gate, known as the Predator's Eye, that was actually hidden within the Imperial Fist Fortress Monastery. Unable to destroy it outright, the Primarch Rogel Dorn had sealed the warp gate nearly 10 millennia before, and vowed that one day, when the countless other threats had subsided, he and his chapter librarians and other champions would finally destroy the Predator's Eye. The warp gate had originally been located in the Kravamesh system within the Veiled region, until Dynethos had stolen it and hidden it within the confines of the Phalanx during the assault on Terra to topple the renegade High Lord Vandire at the end of the Age of Apostasy. From the newly opened warp gate emerged the various foul denizens of the Immaterium, including the master architect of the Soul Drinker's fate, a demon prince of Tzeentch named Abrax. Dynethos intended to use Abrax's power to travel the galaxy with the Phalanx as his personal chariot, spreading the power of chaos throughout the Emperor's realm. Now Abrax would be able to use the warp gate as a doorway into the Immaterium, from which would spill the legions of demons under his command. Dynethos wanted to fundamentally transform the Imperium, freeing his people from the shackles of oppression and fear, and installing himself as the new master of all mankind. Abrax was merely a tool to manipulate like everything else in the galaxy. In the meantime, Sarpedon had escaped his captors and reunited with his remaining battle brothers, leaving them behind to face a glorious death in the Librarium. Sarpedon sought out the whereabouts of Daithanos, but was stopped by Ictanos' flock. The small squadron of soul drinkers that were with Sarpedon were killed in a carefully executed ambush. Enraged, Sarpedon slew the entire flock, and then sought out to confront Ictanos, as the remaining soul drinkers valiantly defended themselves within the ruins of the Phalanx Librarium. They knew that it was only a matter of time before they were wiped out through attrition. At the height of the vicious battle, the encroaching forces of the Imperial Fists and their allies unexpectedly withdrew their forces, sensing that something was awry. The soul drinkers' captain, Luco, led the remainder of his battle brothers out of the Librarium. Monitoring the Imperial Fist Vox traffic, they soon discovered that Abrax was leading a massive demonic force that was assailing the Imperial Fist from within their own fortress monastery. They bravely presented themselves before the Imperial Fist Chapter Master Vladimir Pugh, and begged him to give them the chance to fight and die by their side against a common enemy that threatened all of them. Reluctantly, the Imperial Fist agreed to the Soul Drinkers' request to face the demons, and they understood that this was in itself a death sentence. In the meantime, Sarpedon discovered Ictanos and confronted him in a vicious hand-to-hand battle. Sarpedon was gravely wounded, but not before he managed to subdue the wayward chaplain. Using his innate psychic abilities, known as the Hell, Sarpedon brutally wrestled the information from Ictanos' mind concerning Deinathos' true intentions, and learned to his dismay that Deinathos had planned across the long millennia and how he had been an unwitting pawn in the ancient game. His task completed, Sarpedon took the mortally wounded chaplain, whose mind had been utterly shattered by his psychic assault, and launched him out an air duct into the void of space. He then made his way towards the main drive of the Phalanx to confront Deinathos. Deinathos confirmed Sarpedon's suspicions of what his grand scheme of the galaxy would entail. Deinathos believed that the Imperium was corrupt and that its people were damned. 6 millennia earlier, Deinathos had learned that the Imperium was a dark and savage place, a breeding ground for a desperation that gave the forces of chaos the chance to do their wickedness in the material universe. It was through suffering that the Imperium would be remade, great suffering on a scale beyond imagining by lesser minds, thanks to the plans crafted by him and executed by so many others that he manipulated across the bounds of space and time, including the Soul Drinkers, Sarpedon, and Abrax. The Phalanx would spread such suffering in its wake, and the Imperium would be remade stronger and more just, with Daithanos as the new ruler of the galaxy. Sarpedon bravely confronted the corrupt dreadnought, attempting to stop Deinathos' mad ambition from coming to fruition. During the combat that ensued, Sarpedon sustained multiple mortal wounds from the dreadnought's missiles and Stormbolter. The dreadnought smugly plucked the mortally wounded chapter master from the floor with his power fist, intent on crushing him to death. The dreadnought brought the chapter master closer so he can get a better view as he crushed his victim to death. Sarpedon quickly enacted his desperate plan, reaching into his ammunition pouch that hung from his belt, from which he pulled the soul spear. He reclaimed this ancient Archotech weapon from Ictanos during his confrontation in the Phalanx hangar. Using the artifact's deadly vortex field twin case blades, Sarpedon whipped the soul spear upward through the heart of Deinathos' cybernetic sarcophagus, separating it from the body of the dreadnought. The pressure on Sarpedon stopped as the dreadnought's power fist fell inactive. Sarpedon freed himself from the power fists and stood before what remained of the dreadnought's body. The front of the walker had been completely sheared away, revealing the life support cradle in which Deinathos had spent the last 6,000 years. Reaching inside, Sarpedon tore away at the cabling and wiring and grasped Deinathos around what remained of his scrawny neck. Pulling him out of the sarcophagus, Sarpedon had a fate in mind that befit the treachery enacted by Deinathos. Meanwhile, Captain Luco, Sergeant Gravis of the Soul Drinkers, along with a small squad of Imperial Fists, Librarian Varnica of the Silver Skulls, and a battle sister of the Sororitas, made their way toward the Predator's Eye in order to close the warp gate and confront Abrax himself. Along the way, they were confronted by the demon horrors of the warp, and many of their numbers were slain. In a final confrontation, the surviving Astartes and sisters managed to overcome the vile demon prince and cast him back into the warp. The Predator Eye then began to slowly seal itself shut. At the height of the pitched battle between the beleaguered Imperial forces and the massive demonic host, the sudden closing of the warp gate dramatically affected the demon army. The demons dropped to their knees or began to scream in pain as their link with Abrax and the Immaterium itself was broken. The Imperial forces quickly took advantage and charged into the ranks of the demon horde, cutting them down where they stood. The Imperial defenders drove the demons forward, through the phalanx forges, and on towards a cargo bay, where the heart of the demon infestation had been planted. Librarian Varnica, Sister Asicario, and 2 Soul Drinkers were the only survivors of the great battle to seal the warp gate. When first Captain Lysander arrived to take custody of the Soul Drinkers, the Soul Drinkers' captain hauled the gravely wounded Gravis over toward the closing portal. The 2 Soul Drinkers knew there was no place in the galaxy for them, not in the cells of the phalanx or in the grips of whatever punishment was decided for them, not even in freedom. The whole galaxy had been set against them for so long that there was nowhere they could go and nothing they can do. They would not hand themselves over to the Imperial Fist's custody. The 2 surviving Soul Drinkers stepped through the portal into the warp and into whatever fate awaited them there. The portal then closed completely, cutting off the madness of the Immaterium from real space. As the Imperial Fists and the Howling Griffins were killing off the last of the demons running loose on the vessel, Sarpedon made his presence known. The Chapter Master was near death, wounded, but not defeated. Sarpedon then held up the remains of Deinathos before Chapter Master Pew and the Imperial Fists. He explained that it was he who had brought Abrax forth from the warp. Deinathos had been the architect of their damnation, manipulating the Soul Drinkers chapter into the destiny he had foreseen. Sarpedon explained that it was because of men like Deinathos that innocence suffered, and that he had been a fool for not seeing that Deinathos had been manipulating him into the role he wanted him to play. He challenged the Imperial Fist to succeed where he had not, and to help stem the suffering of mankind, or else do nothing and watch the human race fall. Though moved by his words, Chapter Master Pew still had to take Sarpedon into custody, but the Chapter Master refused. Sarpedon instead somehow managed to reopen the warp gate. As Sarpedon stepped toward the portal, Deinathos grew fearful of his fate within the realm of chaos, and screamed in terror, for the Dark Gods were unkind to those servants who failed. Sarpedon stepped over the threshold and into the portal, dragging the screaming philosopher soldier into the warp and out of reality. The portal then slammed shut behind them. Despite everything that had passed between them, the Imperial Fists recognized the sacrifice of the Soul Drinkers and had their names chiseled on the vast stone columns within the Apothecarion. One column bore the names of the Imperial Fists who had died in the valiant defense of the Phalanx, while alongside it, another column bore the names of the Soul Drinkers, listing them as brothers in death. The Soul Drinkers were gone, but not their legacy, for their tale would serve as a caution to all those who do not see that the hand of chaos is ever present, and ever ready to lead men to their unwitting damnation. The Soul Drinkers have an honored tradition called the Honor Duel. An Honor Duel was a tradition from the Old Way. This traditional form of combat was as old as the Imperial Fist Legion, the legion of the legendary Primarch Rogodorn, from the ranks of which the Soul Drinkers had been founded almost 10,000 years before. The Soul Drinkers believed that the Emperor would give strength to the arm of his champions, and Rogodorn would console victory to the just. They also believed that he would lend strength to those that are worthy. Another well-known Soul Drinker tradition is the Sacred Blood Rite. A few battle brothers, those who made notable skills in battle, were permitted to crack open the skulls of their victims and take the brain materials inside. A quirk of the Soul Drinkers' gene seed had rendered their organs in their stomachs unusually sensitive, and as a result, the genetic memories they could absorb had powerful emotional and spiritual resonance. This became a religious act, For a soul drinker to swallow a goblet of the bloody pink mass, and to experience the memories and sensations that streamed from it. Pains were taken to ensure that those who were not Astartes did not witness this ritual. A non-Astarte was mortally simplistic, and could not be trusted to see the blood rites of the Adeptus Astarte and not come to a wayward conclusion. Trials of the Scintillantian death was an honored tradition amongst the soul drinkers. Each aspirant of the Reclusium, potential chaplains, had to submit themselves to the trial. It had been this way ever since the soul drinker's vessel, the Scintillantian death, had returned to the chapter after its disappearance in the 34th millennium. The aspirants learn of the fear that every battle brother possesses within them. It is not the petty dread of a human. It is a terror that makes every chapter strong, for their battle brothers fight to starve it off, but it makes them weak, for they will all wrench in death with their fear having compassed. The soul drinkers believe that they possess fear that went beyond that which a mere man could comprehend. It was the fear of dying with their work yet undone. For a soul drinker takes all ills of the galaxy upon his shoulders, and as long as they remain, he cannot rest. Theirs was a fight that could never end, and so when they died, it was with battle still to be won. This was the fear that they felt. This was the terror that drove them on. The terror of death, for they believed that everyone died with their duty not yet done. Not all those who submitted themselves to this trial succeed. Some were even lost. This was the price aspirants had to pay for enlightenment, and so, if any aspirants returned successfully, the Reclusium accepted a new student. And those were 40 facts on the soul drinkers. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys have suggestions for any other Space Marine chapter that we haven't covered, please comment down in the comment section below. Let us know which one. And thanks for everything, guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.